Hey everybody, Brian here. Today I am doing the exact opposite of what your local news anchor might be telling you to do this week if you live on the East Coast, and that is be outside. Yeah, those Canadian wildfires right now are pretty serious business. Luckily, the city of Detroit kind of missed the smoke. The winds didn't blow as much smoke this way, so as you can see, you can't really see anything. It's not too hazy today, but I can definitely smell the smokiness. So we're gonna keep this review pretty brief so I can get back inside. The compact sedan segment has been shrinking over the years due to exits from most of the domestic, actually all of the domestic manufacturers from the segment, but the foreign automakers still see a true need for sedans like this, and that's why you'll still see options like the Volkswagen Jetta here. This one right here is the sport trim that was added last year with the refresh. This is one rung above the base S trim, and it gives you an extra bit of sporty goodies and costs $22,650. Let's see what all Volkswagen gives you. Spoiler alert, there's a manual transmission. For this generation, the Jetta has already received a mild refresh on the outside. That was last year for 2022. And like I already said, that's also when they added the sport trim. That's gonna give you the blacked out grille up front, LED headlights, incandescent turn signals, but an LED accent light across the grille as well as these reflector lights down on the sides. These are not full fog lights or anything like that, but they kind of give off that appearance. And I still generally like this design. It's handsome, but it's not as out there as something you might find from a Korean manufacturer. At 186.5 inches long with a 105.7 inch wheelbase, the Jetta is one of the largest options in the segment. In fact, it is definitely the longest. As you can see, we have pretty long front and rear overhangs, but those looks may be deceiving as this doesn't have the most spacious cabin or the most cargo volume in the segment. These right here are the standard 17-inch alloy wheels you will find on the sport trim. They are wrapped in 205/55 Nexen all-season tires. Out back, Volkswagen didn't decide to add any extra visual goodies like a black lip spoiler or anything like that, but we do have a sport trim specific bumper treatment down here. No radar sensors because we don't have any of those features, but we do have full LED taillights and turn signals. I wasn't exactly expecting that. They're not amber, but they're there anyway, so I really appreciate that. Unlike a Toyota Corolla, for example, the Jetta doesn't come standard with a chock-full list of active safety features. Instead, we only get autonomous emergency braking up front with pedestrian detection and forward collision alert. That's it. If you want to get things like adaptive cruise control, you will have to step up to a higher trim, where you can also find things like blind spot monitor with rear cross traffic alert, lane departure warning with lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, and automatic high beams. There are two main flavors of Jetta to choose from, the standard variety like we have here and the GLI. That's going to be the GTI equivalent, but here we're stuck with one engine choice. This is a 1.5 liter turbocharged four-cylinder that produces 158 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. You have your option of an 8-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual like this car has, but there's no other engine choice unless you go for that GLI, which is the company's really well-received 2-liter turbo four-cylinder that produces 228 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque. That one's mated to either a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic, the same transmission I just had in the Volkswagen Arteon. No matter which Jetta you choose, you will never have all-wheel drive as an option. It's front-wheel drive only. Behind this rather voluptuous rear end, Volkswagen has a pretty good-sized trunk. The trunk release is not here in the logo like it is on other Volkswagen products. It's still relegated to just the key fob or the button up front. But once you open it, you get 14.1 cubic feet of space back here. That is near the top of the class, but the Civic, the Sentra, the Elantra, and the Forte will all outdo it. In fact, the Sentra can do 15.3 cubic feet of space, making it the largest in the class. As you can see, a pretty large and deep cargo area, but at first glance, it doesn't look like there's any extra storage. However, there really is under the floor here. No spare tire, but a divider section that allows you to put things in these 4 quadrants. You also have the fix-a-flat kit down in there, and that's pretty much it. So if you wanted to add a tire aftermarket, you could definitely fit one in here because, as you can see, there is a circular space there to work with. Now, if you want to fold down the 60/40 split rear seat, you cannot do it over here on the sides. It actually happens right here with these pull tabs right there. So if you pull the right one, that'll move the 60%. The left side moves the 40%. Rather unfortunately, the front seats in the Jetta Sport are probably the least comfortable seats I have ever sat in a modern vehicle. Now, that is not me trying to exaggerate or be mean to this car. I really like a lot about it, but I just could not find a comfortable position with these seats. There's no lumbar adjustment. They're only 4-way manually adjustable on both the driver and the passenger side. They're not heated on this trim level, nothing extra or anything fancy like that. But just in general, I just couldn't find the proper position. The seats are a little bit weirdly contoured to my back, so I felt like they were pushing me out of the seat during my week with the car. So in general, these are just not my favorite seats at all. Luckily, the front armrest and the armrest on the door are padded enough that they are comfortable to leave your elbow on during long drives. In terms of overall space though, I will say I have plenty of headroom. This model does not have a sunroof of any kind, so you have as much headroom as you can possibly get in a Jetta, and it is plenty for me at 5'9". And visibility, it isn't the most outstanding I've seen in a compact sedan, but the A-pillars are really thin, so you don't have to look around some stubby pillar up front. The back seat is also pretty comfortable, but it is a little bit more claustrophobic than I was expecting. The side pillar right here, this extra little pillar coming in right here, it does feel a little bit further forward than I would like, so it kind of impedes on your visibility as a rear passenger. And though I have a couple of inches of headroom left, I definitely feel like I could get more out of a competitor. But if I move over into the center seat, the main thing you'll notice is the fact that we have a gigantic hump here in the center. And the fact that we don't offer all-wheel drive in this model at all gives me a lot of questions as to why they would even need to have a hump this big, but it is pretty sizable. So if you want 3 people across, they're definitely going to be impeding on the footroom of the outboard passengers. So something to consider. Also, the seat back itself here in the center is really rock hard, so not the most comfortable, but even if I put my head all the way back, I actually do have about an inch of headroom left. So I am not touching the ceiling in this position. That is actually pretty surprising. But this is a pretty small car still at the same time, so it's narrow. You can definitely feel the narrow width here in the center seat. And if I move all the way over to the right side, one touch that we do have here is a fold-down armrest, which in typical Volkswagen style puts the cup holders in this order instead of having them this way, so you actually don't cover them up with your arm. You could still rest your arm here, they could rest their arm there, and 2 cups could fit in there at the same time. One last thing to note back here is there are no air vents or USB charge ports of any type to be found. Taking a look around the interior of this sport trim, keep in mind again that this is one step above the base S trim, so it's not going to have as many nice materials or features that you would find on an upper trim. For example, you do have black cloth seats. These are manually adjustable seats, but we do have height adjustable headrests and seat belts over there. The door panel is mostly hard plastic except for the spot where you would rest your arm right there. That has a nice padding to it that doesn't really feel too firm, so that's pretty nice. But nothing extra special going on over there except for the fact that we have some of the largest bottle holders I've ever seen in a door of any size on any vehicle. If I pan over here to the left side, my pretty large water bottle is sitting in there just fine. I don't know if that's focusing for you, but yeah, that normally doesn't fit in any cup holder of any size in a door. The fact that it easily slides right into this one is really, really nice. You'll also notice that there is no sunroof available on this trim level, but one thing I did notice when I was looking around here is the fact that we have hooks back here in the B pillar that allow you to hang whatever you want, groceries, clothes, items like that. You can hang those up right there in the B pillar. That's a nice little trick. But back over here on the dashboard, again, mostly hard plastic, we have this trim right here, the silver stuff that has a cool pattern in the middle. Let me see if I can zoom in and show you that. It's not carbon fiber look, but it is something sort of in that same vein. So that's a decent look if you ask me. And we have a pretty large glove box below that. It's actually quite large. I could definitely fit a tablet computer or a smaller laptop in there just fine. Moving on over to the dashboard, this design has not changed since this generation first came out. I still really like how they integrate this binnacle right here to allow you to sort of have some shade above the screen. It's not like nestled inside a really deep cover or anything like that. And it's not the tablet style display that everybody seems to hate so much. So this is a really nice balance between the two. It's rocking Apple CarPlay and Android Auto standard, but they are wired, so you do have to plug them in down here at one of the USB-C ports, of which there are 2. Once you get back into it, you do have the same exact normal Apple CarPlay and Android Auto experience that you would in other Volkswagen products, just differently because it's on a smaller screen. I'm the kind of person that enjoys having the cold air blown directly on my face in the summer, and with these vents, specifically this one, I've had a little bit tougher of a time getting that airflow to come directly at my face. It's probably partially due to the position of the steering wheel where I like to have it. Other than that, below here we have your HVAC controls. These are manual adjustments on this trim level. There's no dual zone climate, no automatic climate on the sport trim. It's all very back to basics knobs like this. Below that, no Qi wireless charge pad, but we do have a pretty large spot to put a smartphone or anything else you might want to store back here. And then, of course, again, the USB-C ports for your phone connection. Below here, we do have the 6-speed manual shifter. There's no rev match button, there's no auto brake hold, nothing like that. This is just a very stripped down manual transmission. You do have to actually, push the engine higher up when you're downshifting so you can get back into that right gear. This car will not do that for you. We do have an electronic parking brake though. And kind of interestingly, a 12-volt socket right back here. They have it kind of tucked away behind the shifter, so you might visually miss it or forget that it's there, like I just almost did. I will say I wish they would clear out these button banks, or at least make this one continuous one, so it doesn't remind you how many features you're missing out on this particular trim level. Though down here we do have an eco button, so if you want the engine to have a softer throttle response, you can, eke out better fuel economy with that button right there. Then down below here we have pretty decent sized cup holders. They're not padded, or they don't have any sort of mechanism to keep things in place, so it's just you're going to plop the cup or the bottle or whatever it is and hope it doesn't rattle around. Finally, here in the center, a really decently sized glove box compartment. This is pretty deep and pretty wide. You could fit a couple of plastic bottles of water in there standing upright, and luckily it's padded with the same sort of material you'll find over on the door, so you can rest your arm here and use the manual transmission, and for me it didn't seem to have any sort of conflict. This is a pretty comfortable place to keep your elbow. Steering wheel is like the newer Volkswagen design, but it doesn't have the touch capacitive buttons like I mentioned earlier. All of these are physical and they're right where you want them to be. So cruise control functions, volume, as well as the buttons to control what's going on up there and your track forward and backward. This is not a heated wheel on this trim level, but again, like I said, it is leather wrapped, so it does feel a little bit higher quality than the trim level or price would suggest. One thing that was changed with the refresh is the fact that on the lower trims, we actually do get a partial LCD instrument cluster. As a matter of fact, that is actually a full LCD instrument cluster. It's just not the full Digital Cockpit Pro. So you only have this center portion that is dynamic. These outer sections stay just like that at all times. Nothing really changes. You can't change too much that's going on here. But like with Digital Cockpit Pro, I can go through a lot of different settings and pages. So there's that view, there's this view, and then there's the speedometer view. But since we have a manual transmission, I like to keep the tachometer front and center like this. And you can, of course, change what's going on in the center there. So if you press this button on the left right there, that will allow you to select what's going on the left side, so over here. So as you can see, once I hit that button, it's going to highlight the left side, and then I can start scrolling through what I want displayed over there. So you have quite a few options, including your fuel economy, so I'm going to put that back there. If I push the right side button, I can do it again, scroll through all of those different options. And I really like this because most base LCD instrument clusters don't give you nearly this amount of customization. For example, the new Chevy Trax, though it is similar in size and layout, does not allow you to do nearly as much customization. This won't show you any map data though. Again, if you want to get the full map setup like you get in Digital Cockpit Pro, you will have to step up to a higher trim. That's going to give you the full width LCD instrument cluster. Over here to the left of the steering wheel, you have your controls for your light system, as well as your locking mechanisms, and then the traditional window switches, which are actually automatic up-down for all 4 windows, even on this trim level. The Jetta in this particular sport trim with the manual transmission makes a strong case for a first car for a teenager. And the reason for that, for me at least, is the fact that the interior is not very fancy, doesn't have a ton of features on the inside. The manual transmission is easy to use. The car is not blazingly fast, but it is also super fuel efficient. You can go over, well over 500 miles on a fill-up. So this is a really frugal and really practical and pragmatic choice for first-time car drivers, and at roughly $1,000, it is a bargain for what you're getting. This is not exactly the most fun to drive car in the segment, but with the suspension setup we have in the back and the power we have under the hood, it really keeps up with the best in this segment. Now the Jetta is not glacial in acceleration, but it's not lightning quick. Like I said, it took me 7.5 seconds to get to 60 miles per hour, and that is pretty decent, especially considering I have a manual transmission. Your acceleration experience may vary because of your manual transmission experience, but that's the fun of it. My only problem is the lag you get off the line or from a rolling start. There's about a second or two of delay before this thing explodes with power, and once it does, you've got 184 pound-feet of torque to use, and it's very usable, especially when you're using the manual transmission to downshift and you need to jab on the throttle to get the RPMs back up right where you need them. The turbo really helps get that done really quickly. Braking, nothing to really write home about. The brakes feel really good. They're not too spongy. They're not firm or anything like that. The problem is it took a long time to get back to 0 from 60, 131 feet. These are all-season tires. If you want grippier tires that'll stop quicker, there is a Jetta GLI with summer tires for you. But again, keep in mind the price point and what the theme of this particular model is. Yes, it is sport, but it's not supposed to knock your socks off in any particular regard. Now, handling-wise, there's actually a little bit of an upgrade mechanically between this and the lower S trim that it's based on. That would include a lower suspension by about 15 millimeters and a stiffer front anti-roll bar. So you can throw this into a corner and it will oblige you with a decent time, but it's not going to, again, thrill you like a hot hatch or even the GLI, the performance version of this. Again, with the tires, these are not the grippiest tires out there, but they do a good job of holding their own when you're thinking about the competitive landscape of this particular model. You can have a decent time driving this a little bit more spiritedly than you might with something with narrow tires that are even less grippy than this. The ride is typical Volkswagen bank vault solid. It's not as bank vault-like as the more expensive Arteon I just drove, but for something in this class, it really does feel rigid, well screwed together tightly, engineered and all that. We do have a torsion beam suspension in the back, so like the Mazda 3, the regular Toyota Corolla, the regular Hyundai Elantra, it's not going to feel as well sorted in the back over rough pavement, but that's all right because it still has a very comfortable, smooth ride. I would say this has one of the smoothest rides in this segment. I know I said my only problem with the engine was the lag off the line, but I actually just remembered the fact that the noise it makes is a little gritty for my taste. A little bit too much like a shop vac or like a weed whacker or something weird. It doesn't have a very smooth feel. So when you are pushing the car hard, you will hear that. But in terms of around town driving, cruising around, this car is really, really quiet. I only measured 61.5 decibels in here. That is very competitive and really nice considering how much or how little you're paying. Manufacturers will tell you two reasons why they're ditching manual transmissions: the lack of interest and the fact that their automatic transmissions now can do better fuel economy. Previously, in the past, manual transmissions were always considered more efficient, but nowadays the technology has gotten so good on CVTs and automatics that manual transmissions just can't keep up. But with the Jetta here, that is not the case. It got 43 miles per gallon in my test loop. That is super competitive for a car in this segment based on my experience driving around Detroit. So in that regard, if you're concerned at all about efficiency with the manual transmission, fear not, because you will get gobs of it. The Volkswagen Jetta, especially with the manual transmission in this lower trim level, is a really back-to-basics experience that I think a lot of people might gravitate towards if they're overwhelmed by the complexity of modern cars, even in this segment, because there are a lot of options out there that have pretty complex infotainment systems or interior layouts with haptic feedback buttons. The Jetta is a breath of fresh air for those of you who hate all of that extra modern stuff. It's got an ignition key, it's got a manual transmission, it's got a smaller touchscreen, but it also has a few modern amenities that make it fresh and worth your money in 2023. But you're getting a lot for the money at around $22,000, $23,000. It also comes with really solid driving dynamics for a base model and a manual transmission with a torsion beam rear suspension, but a lot of competitors also have similar setups. Some don't have manual transmission options, but the ones that do, this competes really well with dynamics-wise. The cool thing about the Jetta right now is the fact that all models, even the base S trim, get some form of an LCD instrument cluster. On my particular tester, it's not the full Digital Cockpit Pro, but it is still a pretty useful and configurable setup that is better than anything else you're going to find in that segment for a base model. There are some competitors that have more impressive screens at the upper end, but none of them are going to be quite as good as what you're finding here at the base end. Now the engine, though it does have a pretty peppy feel to it, it does struggle off the line and from a rolling start to get up to speed. There's just a little bit of lag there. If you build out a fully loaded Jetta, the interior materials might seem a little bit subpar compared to some competitors, especially something like the Mazda 3. And finally, though it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest cars in its class on the outside, it's not the largest on the inside, so that ratio is not as strong here in the Jetta as it is in something else out there. On your screen are the closest sedan competitors with gas engines. Yes, some of these options can be given hybrid powertrains, and there are some hybrid versions that I didn't include of other vehicles like a Toyota Corolla, but on your screen we have the closest competitors in terms of the basic setup that you have with the lower end trims like I had. So with the Jetta, as you can see, it has the lowest base price of $21,760, and it keeps going up from there with the Elantra at $22,665, the Mazda 3 at $23,715, and the Civic at $24,845. In my opinion, the Civic is not the best value. You're getting not as much content and that price point compared to what you could get in the Jetta at $24,000, $25,000. The Elantra is still a pretty fresh entry and has a pretty well weighed out interior, and it drives pretty well and has a decent amount of fuel economy benefits with that base engine, but there's no manual transmission option like there is in a Honda Civic Si or a Mazda 3. The upper end prices you're seeing are including the gas performance versions of these models. So for example, the Jetta, that's going to be the GLI fully loaded. The Elantra, that's going to be an Elantra N fully loaded. The Mazda 3 is going to be a Turbo Premium Plus with a really powerful turbo engine. And the Honda Civic is going to be the Civic Si. I didn't include the Type R because the Type R is a hatchback. So this is again strictly just looking at sedans. That's why the top price of the Civic is not nearly as high, because the Civic is sort of in that middle ground with around 200 horsepower or so, whereas the top-end versions of these other models are going to be closer to 230, 240, 50, 60, 70. So there's a little bit of a gap there, which is why the Civic tops out lower. But a Civic Type R is going to be way more than all of these, including the Elantra N, because the Elantra N is closer in power, but it's not going to be that expensive. The Jetta GLI is still a really fun to drive package. It's going to be like sort of like a GTI in a sedan bodied style, but the GTI does have a shorter wheelbase and it is a little bit more fun to drive than the Jetta GLI. When you're looking at the overall package of the Jetta in general, I think it really stands up well to these other competitors, and as you can see, has the lowest top end price for the performance versions. So whichever way you slice it, the Jetta is a really decent value, and it gets really good fuel economy and has that manual transmission, pretty back to basics lower end trim version. You can get the manual with the GLI as well, but if you don't want the steering wheel, the touch capacitive buttons, and you don't want the digital cockpit, and you don't like a push button start, then there's a Jetta for you, and that's the one I had, and I had a really good experience with it. Let me know what you guys think about the Jetta. Do you prefer it over some of these other options, or do you think there's another option I didn't mention that is superior? Like the video if you are a fan of manual transmission compact cars, subscribe for more detailed car reviews like this, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the other social places, including the website for the written reviews.